Deena, can you say hello?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Deena Swatzie. I am the VP Head of Technology Risk at LPL Financial. My career spans over 20 years in technology and IT. And a lot of my role and my function is really around getting in front of our leadership. So, this topic today is near and dear to me because I've experienced imposter syndrome over and over again in my career. And I think it's something that you can't always let go automatically, but it still exists. But just finding ways to really kind of conquer it. It's always been a challenge for me, over 20 years, just moving up the ladder. But you always question yourself, you always doubt yourself. So, I'm excited about this topic. I know it's a lot of discussion that's been going on for over the last few months, probably even the last couple of years, especially among women. So hopefully, I can add a little bit of light to this topic as well. Next slide. So when we talk about imposter syndrome, the first thing I think about is self-doubt. Really self-doubt related to your working accomplishments. You feel like, you have this enormous amount of feelings of, maybe you don't deserve your job. Maybe sometimes, it makes you feel like you're tricking your coworkers into thinking that you're doing this great job. Other symptoms may be things like lack of self-confidence at work, sensitivity to really like these small mistakes, and then that fear of failing your team. And then you become burnt out from working too hard at trying to prove yourself all the time. And if any of these feelings ring true, trust me, you're not alone. I already mentioned, in the beginning, I have experienced it over and over again. And I don't think you ever really stop because I still go through it now. But there are all types of people experiencing imposter syndrome, not just new hires. You even have senior positions and executives that actually are more likely than average to experience imposter syndrome. Next slide, please. So when they define, if you look at the true definition of imposter syndrome, I'll pull out just an excerpt of this. It's really about that psychological pattern where individuals doubt their own abilities, right? So when you think about that, there are a couple key characteristics of imposter syndrome. Next slide. And we'll focus in on a couple of those. But always remember, it's not what you are that holds you back, it's what you think you're not. And that's what imposter syndrome does to you. Next slide. So when we think about those characteristics of imposter syndrome, do you experience self-doubt? Do you experience perfectionism, overworking, fear of exposure? We'll cover a couple of these just so that we can kind of highlight them. Self-doubt, of course, is always the main one. Anytime imposter syndrome is characterized by persistent self-doubt, with those individuals may question their competence, their intelligence, and even their qualifications. And this can happen even in situations where you may have demonstrated competence in the past. Look at attributing success to external factors. That's really about attributing your achievements to like luck, help from others, or just any other external circumstances, rather than just recognizing that your abilities are very, very important and that they have been, successful. Fear of exposure is another one. And a lot of imposters often feel, they fear that they will be exposed as frauds or that others will discover that, you're supposed incompetence, but you're not. You really, this fear of being found out, it can lead to a lot of anxiety and stress. And then there's that perfectionism. Those are those folks that, you set unrealistically high standards for yourself, and then you feel like a failure when you fall short of those standards. Though the overworking is another, which constantly is really around constantly striving to prove yourself. So you work harder and harder and harder until you get to a point where you're burnt out, and then it negatively impacts your well-being. And then there's difficulty accepting praise. Now, I experience this one quite often. People experience imposter syndrome may have difficulty accepting those compliments, recognition for your achievements, and you may even dismiss praise or downplay your accomplishments. I do it quite often, and I shouldn't do it. So I've made an effort to really work towards really celebrating my accomplishments and staying true to myself. I also give myself a pat on the back every now and then because, that will help you along as well. And you'll see, we'll talk about some things that overcome it. And then last but not least is really how comparing yourself to others. This is a no-no. Try to avoid this if at all possible. Every individual is an individual, but sometimes what we'll do is compare ourselves unfavorably to others and think that, the others are more capable and more accomplished and that you're not. And this could definitely affect your self-esteem. So, and that's what you don't want. Really it's all about self-doubt and your self-esteem. And then again, all types of people experience imposter syndrome. Let me make sure that's clear. Those in senior positions are actually more likely to experience, but it's not just limited to any specific demographic. It can affect any individual at various stages of their careers. I mentioned already, I'm 20 years into my career, but it still continues to happen to me. But that's just the nature of it. So why do we do this to ourselves? It's really driven by that internal psychological factor, low self-esteem, perfectionism, or just the fear of failure. It's one or more of those. But there's you end up being in different types of categories. Next slide, please. So when you think about imposter syndrome, what category do you find yourself in mostly? Are you the perfectionist, which has the need to meet exceedingly high standards that may be impossible to achieve? Imposter syndrome, it fuels on perfectionism, striving for flawlessness to prevent exposure as a fraud, reducing productivity, and it enhances performance anxiety. So signs that you may be a perfectionist. So think about this. You may micromanage everything, or you don't know how to delegate tasks. You're trying to do all of them. You obsess over little details. You struggle with decision-making because you're trying to be perfect. And you just have these high standards and unrealistic expectations. So what do? If you think about it, overcoming perfectionism is a process that really requires a lot of self-awareness, self-compassion, and then that willingness to embrace imperfection. So set some realistic goals and expectations and practice self-care and prioritizing progress over perfection. You can break free from those constraints of perfectionism and achieve a healthier, more balanced life if you do so. Now, the superhuman. Superhumans are wanting to do more and more. Those are those high achievers who put incredible pressure on themselves to excel in all areas of life to justify their accomplishments and success. I have a few friends like that. And honestly, they have gotten to a point where now they are truly burnt out. And, you try to talk to them about it, but they're true workaholics. That is the natural fit for this imposter syndrome type. So signs that you could be a superhuman: you don't handle constructive criticism well, you feel stressed when you're not working, and you feel guilty when taking breaks or enjoying leisure activities. So the way to overcome, superhuman imposter syndrome type can be challenging, but it's possible. Try reframing how you think about your achievements. So instead of attributing success to external factors, acknowledge your personal strengths and your hard work. In doing so, you can boost your confidence and improve your self-esteem. Now there's the natural genius. Now that person is characterized by somebody's belief that their success is solely based on their natural talent or intelligence. Success has always come easily to them without really trying. And then as a result, they set these impossibly high standards for themselves. So then when they get into a highly competitive environment, it's incredibly overwhelming as they're forced to challenge themselves. So a couple of signs that you could be a natural genius is success has come easily to you in the past. Your self-confidence suffers considerably when faced with a setback, and you believe success comes from an inherent ability, not hard work and practice. Now, this is one I haven't seen very much, so I don't know if anyone identifies with it, but this one is really hard to acknowledge. It's hard to acknowledge that success is not solely based on an innate talent and intelligence. It combines hard work, practice, and opportunity. So a natural genius imposter syndrome type can be particularly damaging as it creates an unrealistic expectation of perfection. The way to overcome it is self-reflection and reframing negative self-talk. Self-reflection can help you identify your strengths and your weaknesses and develop a more realistic view of your abilities. So instead of considering yourself a genius, consider yourself a work in progress. But it's hard. That self-reflection is hard. So you really have to work hard at it to really analyze and look at yourself. The soloist. The soloist is characterized by feelings of independence and the need to achieve success entirely on their own. I don't know if anyone else has felt this, but I know I did this in the very beginning of my career. I felt like I needed to do this myself, by myself, and not ask for any help from anyone. And you know that there is no I until you really need to have support of others. So it affects people who believe that they must do everything themselves and that asking for help or support is a sign of weakness. As a result, those soloist types often feel isolated and a bit overwhelmed. And I know I felt that a lot, being overwhelmed because I'm trying to figure it all out. But of course, I really needed that help. And if I just could have talked to someone or, found some more information some kind of way other than just trying to do it all on my own, I needed the help. So signs that you could be a soloist: if you're feeling like you need to accomplish everything on your own, of course. Feeling incompetent if you need help, struggling to network. I did that in the very beginning, and difficulty accepting constructive criticism. So how do you conquer it? It always involves identifying the root cause of why you need to be so independent and achieve success entirely on your own. And I thought that of myself only because I didn't know how to ask for help, and I didn't want asking for help to be a sign of weakness or a sign of incompetence. So you see how all of these actually play together, all of these characteristics. But one thing you can do is begin to build a support network, learn to delegate, practice self-compassion, and then begin celebrating success. And those are some key things that I know I've done over my career. As I moved up in my levels of management, I built a strong team, made sure that I learned how to delegate some of the tasks and be there to help support my team, as well as them supporting me. And then celebrating my success. There are days, and I have done this literally, not even in the last week, I have, my manager asked me, my team presented something to the team. And then I told her my team is awesome. And I wanted to make sure that they got the recognition. And then I also wanted to pat myself on the back. So she started laughing. And I said, well, this is what I'm going to do, because I want to make sure I share with others that, yes, I even know I'm doing a good job. The last one is that expert. And that expert imposter syndrome type is common among people who acquired some kind of specialized knowledge or skills in their field. So these would be folks that are in advanced degrees, such as doctors, lawyers, and scientists. And some signs that you might be in that expert category is if you're feeling like you need to master every step in the process. You feel like you need to constantly pursue training and certifications, or you're feeling like a fraud despite having the expertise. And then in some instances, you're struggling with procrastination because you're feeling overwhelmed. So what should you do? Well, an excellent way to overcome the expert type imposter syndrome is to actively seek out opportunities for growth and learning. Doing so can expand your knowledge base and boost your confidence. Whether taking courses, attending workshops, or joining professional networks, seeking out challenges can help you develop more skill sets and combat feelings of inadequacy. So now it's time to try to overcome it. So you're in one of these categories. You've learned a little bit about more and more, but it's all at the end of the day about self-doubt. Next slide, please. But remember, failure doesn't make you an imposter. It makes you human, just like everyone else. And that's one of the key things to take away. Next slide, please. So how do we overcome imposter syndrome? If you are personally struggling with imposter syndrome, there are a lot of actions you can take to reduce those feelings. The most important thing to do is remember you're not alone, and you're not. And these feelings aren't abnormal. But with time and hard work, you can overcome imposter syndrome. And these are a few ways that you can overcome them. Focus on the facts. Imposter syndrome makes you feel like you aren't good at your job, but oftentimes these feelings are based on fear and not reality. So the best way to fight it is to separate your feelings from those facts. Facts are just those observable truths. So you can keep your brain from creating those stories. Have you found yourself creating those stories in your head that you're not that good? Focus on the facts. What did you accomplish? You can't keep your brain from creating those stories, but you can center yourself around those facts. And the next time you're in a situation that makes you feel like an imposter, refer back to the facts versus the stories of the situation. Acknowledge and release feelings. That's another good one. Just because your interpretations of an event are stories rather than the facts doesn't mean that your feelings are less valid. But combating imposter syndrome isn't about ignoring your emotions. Rather, the best way to fight this feeling is acknowledge that you're feeling poorly. So validate that it's okay, and then let those feelings go if they aren't based on reality. Is there something real to work on here, or is it just self-doubt? That's what you should ask yourself. Share how you're feeling. Imposter syndrome can be very isolating, but as we shared above, these feelings are really common in a workplace. So a couple things to focus on. Instead of internalizing your emotions, recognize them and move on. You might even find someone else who has experienced imposter syndrome, so talk to others about it. You might even find that the person you confide in has also felt the imposter syndrome in the past, and they may be able to provide examples on things that have helped them over time. Look for evidence. That's another key one. When you look for evidence, it's really about acknowledging or sharing your feelings isn't helping. So try fighting your feelings with the evidence. Oftentimes, imposter syndrome isn't based on facts. So focus on the facts to fight these feelings. If you often feel like you aren't getting your work done on time, try these steps. Go back over your recent projects, review the work you've done to see if these feelings are based in fact. And if they are, you've identified something concrete you can work on and improve upon. But if they're not, use these facts every time that your voice and your brain pipes up to tell you that you aren't good enough. Another good one, reframe your thoughts. And that's really around there's power in our thoughts. The way we approach the world has the power to shape our reality in both positive and negative ways. So if you often suffer from negative thoughts, start monitoring your mental health or your mental voice and modifying it where possible. This technique won't have immediate results, but over time, it helps to approach situations in a more positive light. The next time you make a mistake, try thinking, that wasn't my best work, but I'll do better next time. It's okay. We all make mistakes. We all fumble, but it's about getting up and keeping it and just jumping back in there. Look for a mentor. That's a great one. To fight imposter syndrome, try actively improving your hard skills and your soft skills. Whenever that little voice in your head whispers that you're not good enough at something, you can always whisper back that you're in the process of getting better. And a great way to do that is finding a mentor. Look for someone in your company or your field that you can get that practical advice and support from. I've had several mentors over the years, not only to help me with my career progression, but also to help me when I just need to kind of talk through some things, understand better like about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. That's a good way to help you get that pat on the back and to get that voice out of your head. Learn from your team members. That's another common symptom, is comparing yourself to your peers and thinking that you're the worst at your job. So the next time you feel tempted to compare yourself to your peers, try taking a step back and instead see what you can learn from them. Another good one is anticipate imposter syndrome to reduce its effects. So try to think ahead of it. Over time, you might notice that you always experience imposter syndrome when specific things happen. If that's not the case, prepare in advance of that situation. Let me tell you, I had a lot of anxiety about giving this keynote today. So Trust me, when I say I've experienced imposter syndrome, this is another key example. Preparing for this keynote and being able to talk in front of everyone, that is something you also, I started feeling some anxiety about. Didn't think that I doubted myself in terms of thinking that I could actually speak on this topic or any topic. And so what I've done to conquer that is to just get myself out there more and speak at more events. So I do a lot of networking within my specific field in IT security. But in addition to that, I speak at different events. So while I'm doing that, it helps me conquer my imposter syndrome. And then that last one, let's celebrate a win, toot your own horn. Sometimes the best way to fight imposter syndrome is just to face it head on. And the next time you feel like you did something well, celebrate it. If you're comfortable, share your accomplishment with your team. And if not your team, like I'll tell my team that they've done great. I'll even send out, a note to my team and say, we all have done great. And I feel like I've done a great job. But I also share it with some of my friends because sometimes, maybe I just want to, continue that on. And then I'll celebrate with them, afterwards. Next slide, please. So I'm going to leave you with a couple powerful mantras. So as you continue on in your careers and you experience any kind of imposter syndrome, know that it's normal and remind yourself of this. It's normal to feel insecure sometimes. Perfection does not exist, and mistakes are part of any success story. Criticisms does not equal failure. I'm meant to be here. And that's when I would definitely say that on a regular. I'm meant to be here because you are. And it's better to try than to never know. And I that's a really, really strong one too. Just try it. Put yourself out there. I've learned that from a lot of my mentors. Put yourself out there. And the more times that you do it, the more confident you would become. Because trust me, everyone else doesn't know it either. So thank you. And I'll open it up for any questions.
Well, Deena, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. And yes, as a reminder, if anybody would like to ask a live question, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. But let's go through some of the questions that came in through the chat. We'll start with this one that came from Bailey, and she says, how about helping my young team? Any advice on helping them know they have this?
Oh, yes. I have my daughter is 25 going on 26, but this is something I've had to talk to her about too in her career. And remember, imposter syndrome doesn't matter what industry that you're in. It's really just about you questioning yourself and that self-doubt. So I've always constantly encouraged my daughter to continue to put herself out there. So to try. So my daughter's an artist. So I encourage her to go out there, do your auditions. If you have an idea and you want to share your idea or you want to execute on your idea, go ahead and do that. So she's become stronger as a creative person, right? So she's created videos, she's done a lot of choreography. So I've helped her to just kind of explore different paths so that way she can continue to get herself out there.
Well, that's wonderful. I think we have time for maybe one more question, and then we'll ask you for some final thoughts. And Cynthia says, I experienced imposter syndrome as a mom, but not in my career. How can I get past this?
Use the same techniques. It doesn't matter. I don't really think it's really about your career. It's just that's where it happens the most. It's really about you're having self-doubt about your expertise, and you don't have to. So your mom is really kind of like another career, right? And so it doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing. Continue to strengthen yourself so you can use all these same techniques for yourself as a mom as well.
Well, thank you so much. Well, before we move on to our next presentation, do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom for all of our viewers today?
I would just say thank you for all the questions and thank you for your patience. I'm really excited that I was able to get through this today because, like I said, I have it too. Imposter syndrome is very real. And this was another obstacle for me, but I'm excited that I accomplished it today. So thank you all.
Well, thank you for your time today.